Hello everyone, welcome back into another stream of reacting to lore videos. I hope you're doing well on this April Fool's Day in 2025. So yesterday on stream, we watched first Level of It Lore's video about why does the Elden Beast attack us. Then we followed that up with Marika and the Snakeskin in Bonnie Village unveiling the Golomide Queen connection by Pivagale Sage. Then we watched Uncovering Marika and the Shaman's Hidden Origins, Elden Ring Lore Theory and Speculation by Zafe the Scholar. And we finished that up with the Erdtree is a Tree of Memories, Elden Ring Lore by Nameless Singer. So for today's stream, I figured we could continue with Nameless Singer's video on why is everybody in Elden Ring blind Elden Ring lore. Then, because I released this video 2 years ago and a lot of people didn't pick up on it being an April's Fool joke, I thought it'd be fun to look at my video on why the Frenzied Flame ending is the best ending in Elden Ring, and then I'll kind of go over things point by point with that and my thought processes while making that video. And then Titan had requested that I check out one of his two videos, with this one being Frenzied Flame and Midra Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree Lore 4K. So high quality on that one, it seems. So, right, that's what I have on tap for tonight. So anyway, Hanover9191, welcome in. Levo, nice to see you. I'm assuming on an alt account earlier and also on your main. We have Mercy, True Connoisseur, Mendacious Cat, Elden Enthusiast, and Without Horns. Welcome back in. I Shema yourself. Immediately dated the stream, rip evergreen material. Well, that's how it goes sometimes. Yeah, I try not to do it, but every once in a while I will. Why are you throwing a fit? Calix the Shirt, nice to see you again. I got your neck. Oh man. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive on into the first video tonight with Nameless Singers, Why is Everybody in Elden Ring Blind? And then Jay Rizzle, nice to see you again. Right, here we go.
Many characters in Elden Ring are blind. So far, I've identified 27 characters who are blind, and that list is by no means complete.
Alright chat, who'd she forget?
Some of these individuals are naturally blind. Some have had their eyes gouged out, but others have purposely blinded themselves. Why? Because there is a power one can use once they have been deprived of their regular eyesight. The power to see with the third eye. What can one see with this third eye? I think that the third eye can see fate. The third eye, also called the mind's eye or inner eye, is an invisible eye usually depicted as located on the forehead, and it provides perception beyond ordinary sight. I think we see depictions of the third eye in the game. On the Fire Prelate's helm and the Carrion Preceptor's Mask of Confidence, on Azur and Lusat's Glintstone crowns, on Godwyn's forehead, on the forehead of the Jar Shamans and the Ancestral Follower Shamans, and most obviously in Saint Trina's torch.
Yeah, I don't know if I would agree with pretty much most of those examples, to be honest. I think it's very arguable.
I think the reason why there's so much third eye symbolism is because in this fantasy world, the third eye is a real thing that exists. FromSoft has done this before.
Looks like Levo was a little bit ahead with we are thinking on the basis of planes. What we need are more eyes.
Bloodborne introduced the concept of eyes on the inside. The item Third Umbilical Cord, also known as the Cord of the Eye, is used to gain insight and, so they say, eyes on the inside. The cord's description also mentions how no one remembers what eyes on the inside truly entails, but I think
And it's been so long since I've looked at that. I don't remember exactly what the Japanese was. I know that there's enough differences in the umbilical cords that there might be something on this. This part doesn't stand out to me because I just remember it being like very oddly worded in the not flavor text, like the more descriptive text or the non-unique text, I should say. Let me double check right quick. Insight, and so they say eyes on the inside. Oh, the final line. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Good enough. Yeah, that's fine.
In this game, Elden Ring, we can figure it out. The concept of the mind's eye first appeared in English in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, where he tells us that one of the 3 men dwelling in a castle was blind and could only see with the eyes of his mind, namely, those eyes with which all men see after they have become blind.
That's interesting. That kind of surprises me at how late it seems. Although I guess I don't remember when the Canterbury Tales were written. I don't think it was like that early. I want to double check this for my own peace of mind. 1387. Okay. I thought it was around there. So yeah, I'm a little bit surprised. Wait, why does Chinese Wikipedia come up for me first? Anyway.
Upon becoming blind, you must use your mind's eye, aka third eye, to see. For the characters who are naturally blind or forced to become blind, they learn to see this way out of necessity. For the characters who purposefully blind themselves, I think they're doing so because they want to see with a third eye. But why? What's so useful about seeing with a third eye? In many cultures in the history of the world, the opening of one's third eye allows one to see in a new way. It's associated with becoming more spiritually attuned, gaining a heightened awareness, and a deeper intuitive understanding of one's connection to something greater. In this game, I think the opening of the third eye grants one the ability to see fate. Many blind individuals are connected to the concepts of fate and prophecy. The ancestral follower shamans have their eyes closed and have a third eye painted on their forehead.
So part of me is curious if in this context she's going to tie fate to grace, or if this video is meant to be divorced from the other one. I think this one came out more recently. Let me double check actually. Yes. So this one came out a little bit after the other one. Okay.
Traditionally, shamans are people who can access the spiritual world, enter altered states of consciousness, and who practice divination. That is, the ability to scry, make prophecies, and predict the future. The verb form of divination is to divine. The finger reader crones don't have eyes, and Enya tells us she divines the words of the 2 fingers. Erdtree prophets like Corrin wear the prophet's blindfold, and they make prophecies such as foreseeing the burning of the Erdtree. The flame of ruin is anathema to the Erdtree, but prophets sometimes glimpse it within the faith all the same. More like glimpse it within the fate, in my opinion. Hyetta, too, is blind, but we feed her fingerprint grapes so that she can see the distant light, which cannot be seen with the naked eye. After we have become the 3 fingers, we touch Hyetta in the middle of her forehead, where her third eye would be. This act causes her regular eyes to melt. After this, she is able to touch the words of the 3 fingers and divine them for us. Oracle envoys have their eyes covered. They too are blind. Oracles are mediums who provide prophecies. A prophecy is a prediction of the future. One's fate is one's future. Thus, the oracles are those who can see fate.
I'm going to listen to that part again.
Provide prophecies. A prophecy is a prediction of the future. One's fate is one's future. Thus, the oracles are those who can see fate.
That's fine. It's just kind of weird way to link that. Prophecies linked to fate. That's pretty straightforward. Okay. And then Jay Dixon, welcome back in, by the way.
All these individuals have 2 things in common. They are blind, and they have the ability to divine fate. Corrin's prophet blindfold directly connects the concepts of blindness and prophecy together. It says, "Why hesitate if the path leading to the future is clear? Just close your eyes and walk." By closing your eyes, you can see the path to the future. The Beast Champion helm echoes this idea.
There's a lot of weird stuff with Corrin, which makes me wonder if things were rewritten or not, because pretty much the stuff with the prophet eye covering, whatever it's called, kind of goes at odds with his character, because he spends like his entire time like doubting himself and placing his trust in somebody else with Goldmask. And then of course, like once Goldmask does stray from the path, he's like, "What are you doing?" And then he has a nervous breakdown. So I don't know, I just thought that was a little bit interesting.
The beasts, their eyes and ears covered, represent an oath: see nothing, hear nothing, doubt nothing, and carry on along the path set in stone. The path to the future is fate. Corrin's blindfold is telling us that you can see fate when you are blind. The prophets have the ability to foretell big important prophecies about the world, like the burning of the Erdtree. But Corrin's prophet blindfold takes the notion of seeing the future to the extreme. It suggests that when you have complete faith in the future, in fate, then you don't even need to see to be able to walk. Perhaps if you believe in fate this much, you don't need to see to fight either. Many enemies we fight are blind. Moreover, many have purposefully blinded themselves. These enemies don't just blunder around, they're serious opponents. In fact, many of them are the strongest fighters of their factions. The Fire Knights are under the personal command of Mesmer. The Fire Prelates lead the Fire Monks. The Azula Beastmen who have their eyes covered are also those with the fanciest armor set, like they're of a higher rank. It seems like the game is suggesting that not only can you fight while blind, but this ability is desired and is used by some of the strongest enemies in the game.
To be fair, while I don't entirely disagree with the characterization of the Beastmen warrior types, I don't necessarily agree that I would place these higher rank than the little priests, which caused lightning to fall down. And those ones seem to be closer to Malekith, although, maybe that's just the duality of the priest and the warrior within Malekith himself. I don't know.
I think these individuals don't need to rely on their regular old two eyes to see, because they are relying on something else to help guide their movements. I think they're basically Jedi. In A New Hope, Obi-Wan gives Luke a helmet to blind him, and instructs him to use the Force to block the laser shots.
This time, let go your conscious self and act on instinct.
With the blast shield down, I can't even see. How am I supposed to...
Meow says you should do a playthrough blindfolded, so that is kind of unironically a challenge run. I don't know how good the sound design of Elden Ring is to facilitate that super well, and I think Elden Ring also suffers from being way, way, way bigger and a lot easier to fall off things in a lot of ways. But I had considered doing something like that with Bloodborne, but I don't know, it just seems like it could go very wrong very easily.
supposed to fight?
Your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them.
If it were possible to see into the future, you could know what your opponent's next moves would be, and therefore gain an edge in battle. This is a huge strategic advantage. No wonder these blind warriors seem to be of a higher rank. They're essentially wielding fate as a weapon.
Remember, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him.
You mean it controls your actions?
Partially, but it also obeys your commands.
Doesn't it make
True Connoisseur references Zatoichi as a likely reference. For what it's worth, they also do have a sword cane in the game, and yeah, that's kind of always been a pretty big thing on a lot of Japanese people's psyches. Well, maybe that's misphrasing it to a degree, but yeah, he's definitely a well-known character for sure.
sense now? How a blind swordsman was able to seal away an ancient god, a god that was rot itself? Perhaps the flowing sword he used was not just a curved sword or flowing river, but the flowing current of fate which guided him. While I don't think that the Force and fate are equivalent, I think that this is the best way to explain why and how these warriors are fighting so well while blind, and why they have chosen to be blind. They are following the path of fate, which they can see with their inner eye. Why hesitate? Just close your eyes and swing. I think the third eye is not just some abstract idea in the game. I think it's something in our head which we've discussed before. I think the third eye, aka the mind's eye, aka the inner eye, is the rune. Technically, it may be more accurate to say that the rune occupies the third eye. The real third eye may be the black hole that exists in the center of the runes, which we can think of as the pupil which sees fate. We can directly tie runes to fate with one simple piece of evidence: the guidance of grace. The runes are grace, per their descriptions. The guidance of grace is meant to...
Oh yeah, without horns, you just blew a gigantic hole in this theory that the third eye is in the stomach. Just look at the fire giant for proof. Got her.
Guide the tarnished to the path they are meant to follow. Path equals fate, as we said before. Thus, the guidance of grace, the guidance of the runes, we could say, guide us to our fate. We can also tie the runes to eyes. The runes look like eyes. Runes are floating in the eye sockets of the skulls with glowing eyes that drop Golden Rune 1. Marika's rune was placed into Mesmer's eye, and Leda's rune is an unalloyed light that has never dwelled in an eye, though it sounds like it was meant to. The runes are grace, and grace is said to have once dwelled in the eyes of the inhabitants of the lands between. Perhaps it's as simple as saying that our regular two eyes can see fate, and we can end this conversation here. But if our regular two eyes can see fate and be used to make prophecies, then why is everybody blind? Why do we see so many depictions of a third eye? Grace dwells within these two eyes, but perhaps it's possible that it also dwells within the third eye, the rune. The symbols on Azur and Lusat's foreheads, along with the Preceptor's mask, have golden rune symbolism.
Hold on, I want to double check her list at the very beginning. So we're at 10:08. Huh. I'm surprised because my mind has gone to this character quite a bit throughout the video so far, and I was wondering if she'll get to him or it. Yeah, I don't see Estelle on here, surprisingly. All right, so 10:08. Oh, she's going to get to him. Okay.
The rune. The symbols on Azur and Lusat's foreheads, along with the Preceptor's mask, have golden rune symbolism. What's inside Estelle's forehead looks kind of like a Lord's rune. Rykard fed himself to the serpent, great rune and all, and we see the serpent devouring the middle of his forehead, where the...
I'm not trying to contradict her here. However, one thing that I've also noticed about Lusat and Azur's eye with like the Estelle eye type thing is that it also kind of looks like the very beginning of Comet Azur. I think I have something for that. Might not be a screenshot, it might be footage. Maybe this will be good enough. Hey guys, look, it's his eye people thing almost, just with stars instead of an iris. Nice astral Estelle timing, I know, right?
Looks kind of like a Lord's rune. Rykard fed himself to the serpent, great rune and all, and we see the serpent devouring the middle of his forehead, where the third eye is usually depicted as being. While not specifically depicting the third eye, Corrin's cartwheel and Goldmask's mask have golden rune symbolism, suggesting that their heads are runes. Plus, when we recollect our dropped runes, they return to the center of our forehead. Marika's...
I felt like that was a little bit lower, to be fair. Like, that was more like in the center of her head rather than the forehead.
Our dropped runes, they return to the center.
Yeah, this is significantly lower. It's just unfortunate when you try to assert those kind of claims and it doesn't really follow, I think.
Of our forehead. Marika's scar and soreseals are eyes and have the same design as her headband.
I don't know about that one.
Suggesting that her head is equivalent to an eye.
Oh, she means this part. Like, okay, hold on. Okay, that's fine.
Her headband comes to a point exactly where her third eye would be. If you subscribe to the Jar Saint theory, Marika was likely a Jar Shaman, and the Jar Shamans have a third eye symbol on their foreheads.
And I feel like this one is still arguable.
Corrin, Goldmask, and Marika are all blind, and this symbolism could be hinting at what they are really using to see. In addition to this visual evidence, I previously suggested that our runes are functionally equivalent to something else that resides within our head. Our runes may represent our soul, our memory, our brain, and our consciousness. In the Tree of Memories video, I suggested that the runes are Elden Ring's equivalent of the soul items from Dark Souls, thus the rune may represent our soul. I also suggested that because lowercase r runes represent our experience points, we can call them memories. The rune items grow in size as we accumulate more experience, more memories, because they are the vessels for our runes, the vessels for our memory. In real life, the brain is the vessel for our memory, and thus the rune could be said to represent our brain.
So I don't remember how much detail I went into these yesterday. I know I complained about it here and there, obviously, but part of the reason why I'm against putting the souls in with the runes is because the weird dichotomy with souls being more tied to the primeval current and space and fate guided by the stars and stuff. And I know in another video by Nameless Singer, she does equate the stars with runes to some degree, so this probably isn't an issue for her, but it just gives me pause in going that far. And from what I can tell so far, it seems there's a lot more overlap with the concept of will in runes to me than anything relating to souls in particular, because of the way that soulless demigods still seem to have runes or memories or, remembrances within them and whatnot.
We elaborated on this idea in the Runes Are Stars video, where
Got
I
her.
suggested that the runes represent the brain's regressive process of making meaning from sensory inputs. That is, they represent the process of consciousness. Bloodborne explicitly connects the inner eyes to the brain. The item which mentions eyes on the inside is the third umbilical cord, and we can find a few of these cords in the game. One of them, Yosefka's cord, describes how Provost Willem sought the cord in order to elevate his being and thoughts to those of a great one by lining his brain with eyes. It may sound too reductive to say that the runes represent all the following things: our two eyes, our third eye, our brain, our consciousness, our memory, our mind, and our soul. But ever since Demon Souls, souls have been memories, eyes, and the mind. The opening line of the intro cutscene for Demon Souls says, "On the first day, man was granted a soul, and with it, clarity." You need your soul to be able to see and think and have a self and be alive. Eyes are the windows.
I think clarity in this sense is meant in the sense of mental clarity as opposed to like visual acuity, but I guess I'd also need to double check the kanji for that one. But anyway, Mendacious Cat, nice to see you again, and Iman, welcome back in.
To the soul, after all. Credit and thank you to Antediluvian Girl for this piece of evidence. I have an explanation for how the grace which dwells within our two eyes comes to dwell within our third eye, our mind's eye. In real life, light enters our eyes through our pupils and activates light sensors in our retinas. These sensory inputs are then unified into one seamless visualization of our external reality within our brain. Grace is described as golden light, and like regular light, I think it pools into a unified experience within our consciousness. In the last two videos, Tree of Memories and Runes Are Stars, people have commented on how the runes can't represent the brain because they are so clearly meant to represent eyes. The rune representing the third eye is my best explanation for how we can reconcile these two ideas. However, besides just regular light, it seems like there's also something else, some knowledge of the future, an element of fate, which also pools into the rune. And this is what makes it possible to fight while blind. I had mentioned that instead of saying that the rune is the third eye, it may be more accurate to say that the rune occupies the third eye. In our eye, the pupil is the central black hole through which light is let in. Our rune objects also have a central black hole, around which this golden stuff gathers. This central black hole may function as the pupil, and may be the part of the rune which actually sees fate. The golden stuff gathering around the black hole are lowercase r runes, which we have described as experience, memory, and knowledge. Most generally, maybe we can just call runes some form of information.
I guess in a way, the rune iris would be like the quote-unquote fingerprint of the eye in this case, if they contain your memories. And that is indeed a Two Fingers joke. I'll be here all night.
The black hole at the center of the rune is that which sees the golden information. I think whatever exactly allows the blind to see is part of this golden information. I originally had some 2,000 words written diving into the nature of this information, but that ended up being such a deep rabbit hole that I chose to bail and save that discussion for another video. In lieu of my thoughts on the subject, I would love to hear what you think in the comments below. One issue with figuring out what the element of information is that allows one to see fate is that we don't totally understand how fate works. Is the future predetermined or not? Characters like Ronnie and Mikola do have a fate, but they are actively fighting against it. The guidance of grace is there to guide us along the proper path, but we don't have to follow it. This is very close to how fate is described in Berserk. The character Flora says, "God bestows upon us fate, but it is the children of men who choose it." All that I do know is that these enemies that we fight really do have the ability to fight while blind. They are receiving information about the world around them that doesn't require their eyes, likely via their third eye. Another issue with this theory that we need to address
Maybe they're all playing the game in third-person mode as well.
is that the runes are specifically said to be grace, an idea that we associate with the Elden Ring and Erdtree. However, the ancestral followers have third eye symbolism, and their culture is said to exist outside the purview of the Erdtree.
Which is really damn annoying because you got like a group of them stomping around a minor Erdtree in Liurnia.
You could maybe explain this by saying that we still get runes from ancestral followers, and the regal ancestor spirit remembrance is hewn into the Erdtree. But I also have evidence, which we'll discuss in the next video, suggesting that the knowledge of how to fight while blind dates back to Ra, which was definitely pre-Erdtree.
And for what it's worth, as far as the regal ancestral spirits being hewn into the Erdtree, I don't necessarily think there's a contradiction with them trying to avoid the Erdtree while they're alive or even while they're dead, but kind of being forcibly brought into the order through conquest regardless.
The best explanation I have is that in these older ages, the black hole pupil was still being used for blind sight, but the stuff pooling into it may not have been gold, but instead was a substance of a different nature. The whole point of this video is to suggest that the third eye can see fate, and that a contender for the third eye is the rune.
So I would be very curious to see what she has to say about gold's relationship to all of this, because obviously we're told that it's called the grace of gold within a certain context, and of course I do think that there's a very likely chance that the nature of gold changed over the history of the Lands Between, as evidenced by, you know, the dragon's red lightning and the current version of red lightning still being essentially gold. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of room for thought about that.
If you're with me on this, I would like to demonstrate how I think this works, why golden thread is used to symbolize fate, and why Radagon is associated with being a tailor. As we discussed in the Runes Are Stars video, at every point in time, there's a regressive process converging the many electrical signals of the neurons in your brain into something called consciousness. This is what your brain is doing at this very moment as you watch this video. We can use the rune to symbolize this process, and plot the present moment in the middle of this time plot here. The present moment is the convergence of sensory stimuli into consciousness, but as we pass from one moment to the next, the previous moment becomes memory. If you were to plot every moment of someone's life on the x-axis here, and went to the very last point, the moment of their death, looking back, you could say that this plot represents the entirety of their memories. From this perspective, it looks a bit like a golden thread, don't you think? In many mythologies,
I feel like
fate
that's a bit
is
of a stretch right there, to be honest.
symbolized by a golden thread. The thread is spun, manipulated, and eventually cut by a trio of goddesses known as the Fates. The Fates were beings beyond time, capable of visualizing a human's entire life, all their memories. Because fate is everything that happens to you while you are alive. It is the totality of your memories from birth to death. This plot represents the totality of a person's memories across their lifetime, recorded as individual moments of the regression of sensory stimuli into conscious experience. This plot represents fate. Radagon is associated.
Didn't she... So, just to build off of the prior cosmology that she was establishing with the Erdtree being a memory tree in her other video, wouldn't it be a lot easier for her to have said that in George R.R. Martin's cosmology that rune represents memory, and therefore rune equals memory, and life, and they're quote-unquote being threads of fate? I think that would have been a little bit easier. Rather than like the visual imagery, I suppose.
Associated with being a tailor. He possessed golden tailoring tools and a gold sewing needle. Note that the eye of the needle is threaded with golden thread. Radagon ordered the Carrion preceptors to don the Mask of Confidence, which has its mouth sewn shut with gold thread in a design akin to Radagon's seal. Radagon, who represents regression, sews with a golden thread. The key to understanding why Radagon sews with a golden thread is to understand that each time point in this plot represents an act of regression. If you visualize sewing this golden thread into a piece of fabric, you could say that each stitch is being stitched by a process of regression. Each moment of reality you experience as a thinking, conscious human is being woven into the fabric of space-time by the act of regression that is your consciousness. This is your fate, and it's a golden thread. Ultimately,
And this is your fate on drugs.
the reason why a golden thread is used to represent fate is simply for convenience. It's just a metaphor to express a metaphysical idea that cannot easily be described or visualized otherwise. The rune is the third eye, so let's replace each moment of this plot with an eye. I think that the mechanism of how to see into fate involves looking into this golden thread, this stream of memories. I like to think of this plot as being like a fiber optic cable, through which one can see into the future or the past, through which one can see through time. However, just like there's a horizon past which we cannot see when looking across space, there may also be a horizon past which we cannot see when looking across time. It may be that the folks who are well practiced in predicting the future have increased their ability to see into time, and thus into fate, and this is how they make their prophecies. Like the Fates are beings beyond time and can see all of fate, there's a being in the game who is beyond time who may also be able to see all of fate, Placidusax. The evidence for this is that we must go to Placidusax's arena to use Miquella's needle, the needle which allows one to cheat fate and avoid becoming the Lord of Frenzied Flame. I think the reason why we can do this is that we essentially go beyond time, restitch our own thread, and rewrite our fate. We are emulating the same power that the goddesses of fate possess. Placidusax may also have some ability to influence fate. After all, the Dragon King's Cragblade is shaped like a needle. And Placidusax himself is sitting in the center of an arena that is shaped like a giant eye. It may not only be him, but other ancient dragons too. Ancient dragon scales lightly twist time, which may give them some ability to see across time, and thus into fate. Though officially called spears, many of the dragon lightning incantations are shaped like needles. The Bolt of Grandsax is shaped like a needle. If a needle represents the ability to weave fate, perhaps this has something to do with why Grandsax stabbed Elaine Dell. Not everyone who is blind has the ability to use their third eye to see. For example, the nomadic merchants appear to be blind, but they use their instrument bow as a support cane to walk around. It seems like learning to see with one's third eye is a difficult task, and those who learn to do so are rare. The images you see with your mind's eye are mental representations of
Titan, nice to see you again. You bring up a good point that Placidusax's arena is also in the eye of the storm.
Sensory inputs. The less input you have from your other senses, the easier it is to focus on these mental representations. This is why so many characters purposefully blind themselves. Errant sorcerer Wilhelm seems to have been the most extreme. He wears a blindfold, was a silent seeker of sorcery, and hung out in Hermit's village on Mount Gelmir, presumably alone, hence the name. His staff of loss is wielded by sorcerers who believe that discovery comes through acts of asceticism. Asceticism is self-denial, abstinence. All these characters are practicing a form of asceticism. They cut off the outside world so that they can focus on the inner one. One strategy to learn to see with one's third eye seems to be the path of asceticism, but I think there may be another. It may be that suffering is another way that one can open their third eye. In spiritual traditions, an intense personal hardship can trigger a profound spiritual awakening, allowing a person to access deeper levels of perception and intuition. There's also modern research showing that people who have near-death experiences record a profound mental shift or change in consciousness afterwards. It may be that an immense amount of pain, mental or physical, can cause one's awareness to become heightened and changed. This phenomenon may be what opening the third eye refers to. I think we see this playing out in the game. I reasoned briefly towards the end of the Tree of Memories video that suffering may lead to an increase of consciousness. As is suggested by the Tooth Whip, the shamans were whipped, aka tortured, which perhaps increased their level of consciousness and made it easier for their spirit to meld with the spirits of others. The shamans we see in the jars have their eyes covered, and they have a carving in the middle of their foreheads where their third eye would be.
So, Levo, you bring up an interesting question. You said maybe through suffering, you end up with the eye head of the Frenzied Flame Lord. I feel like that could be argued potentially either for or against by Nanaya's entreaty to Midra. Endure, the word was a curse. If he is currently enduring and he is not the Frenzied Flame eye boy, then that might imply that suffering isn't enough to cause that, but it's actually like the giving in to despair, which kind of completes the transformation. So nonetheless, I think like suffering is a necessary step towards true despair, and that seems to be a necessary component for some kind of extra body possession in terms of like what you get with Yura/Shabriri, potentially Hayata and Arena, and more importantly, between Millicent and becoming Galry's full-butted Scarlet Valkyrie lady. Hey, Platinum Chip, nice to see you again. We're doing pretty well. How about you? Without horns, you wonder if she's going to say the increased suffering leaves a memory imprint as the ghost that we can see around the game. I do think there's a good potential of that, and I've been waiting to bring up another point as not necessarily like a counterpoint, but maybe something else with which to consider within like the whole grand dichotomy of things. So I'm just going to hold my breath for now. Not literally, though.
We touch Hayata's forehead where her third eye would be, and then we watch her go through the incredibly painful experience of having her eyes burned out. After which, she's able to practice divination and prophecy. The prophet set is made from rough fabric that scrapes against the skin like a sharpening file, which sounds rather painful. This set is worn by exiled prophets that were persecuted and driven from their homes. Even after his exile, Corrin refused to recant his prophecies, and for this he was blessed with the guidance of grace. Corrin went through a painful experience, after which he was blessed.
We have this weird case of not knowing whether all the Tarnished were exiled with Godfrey, or with some or if some were also produced after the fact, which is likely based on Nefeli Lu's relationship to Godfrey / Hoarlu. But just thinking about the whole idea of prophets being tarnished who saw fire in the Erdtree, would that therefore imply that that prophecy was ordained before even Radagon's time? It seems most likely, but I do wonder.
Blessed with the ability to see into fate. We know that many tarnished do not have the ability to see Grace's guidance. Perhaps this is only something that can be achieved through pain, by opening one's third eye. Yet we, a tarnished of no renown, have this ability. Perhaps this is because we have to go through a painful experience to start the game. The game begins with the death of our maiden, and then we are forced to die. When we awake, we have the ability.
Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention in conjunction with yesterday's video about the memories and stuff, the more memory one has, the stronger imprint they do leave in death, like Without Horns was saying, because the spirit ashes, like the quote-unquote renowned spirit ashes, are those that have renown, aka names, after their death, and they are typically a lot more powerful than the spirit ashes of no renown.
Ability to see the guidance of grace. The thorn sorcerers had their eyes gouged out by thorns, a painful experience, and it was afterwards that they discovered the blood star within them. If runes are stars and the rune is the third eye, then perhaps we can say that this is a reference to how they opened their third eye. And one last fun one, the fire giant rips off his foot in order to open his eye, which is technically a third eye. Pain often comes from loss. As described by the Staff of Loss, asceticism is a form of loss. Putting these two ideas together, you could say that what causes the third eye to open is loss.
That's right, guys. The comic was created to open your third eye.
There's more to be discovered about the nature of what can be seen in the darkness within us using one's third eye, and we will continue to do so in future videos. If you enjoyed this video and feel that it contributes positively to the Elden Ring community, please leave a like to help boost its visibility within YouTube's algorithm. If you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe. My fellow Tarnished, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.
Okay, so I do have like some unanswered questions, but I mean that's just kind of the nature of pretty much anything relating to FromSoft lore at this point. So I'll get to those in a moment, or maybe not unanswered questions, but just like thoughts or extraneous observations perhaps. So anyway, I've gone ahead and linked Nameless Singer's video in the chat right now if you want to give her some support. I went ahead and liked this video because I think it brought up some interesting points, even if I don't necessarily agree with like some of these observations here. I do think it's worth having this line of inquiry into this broader theme in general. So the thing that I was mentioning earlier, which I don't know if it's supposed to have any thematic ties into Elden Ring whatsoever, but it's just been something that has what's the word? Hold on, let me try to find this. Okay. Has kind of weighed on my mind while thinking about the subject in general is the ringed knighthood from Dark Souls 3. So it says that this is the hood of the ringed knights. These knights don abyss-tainted black cloth with layer upon layer hiding their eyes. This is nothing less than an attempt to reveal that which the seal of a fire has occluded, a subtle defiance of the gods' wishes. So, for those who may not have played Dark Souls 1, 2, or 3, or especially 3, basically the humans in Dark Souls were conquered in a way by the gods, and the humans are of the dark, and the gods, fearing the dark, placed seals of fire upon the humans to kind of enslave them in a way and try to keep the darkness within them at bay. Long story short, it doesn't exactly work, but the ringed knights were kind of forced to serve Gwyn, and this hood is supposed to occlude the seal of fire, so that way they are able to see again, because the fire is blinding in a way. So I wonder if there's an allegory to be had between, not allegory, what's the other word? Analogy? An analog to be had between what's going on with Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring with the blindness. So if that's the case, I do wonder if Marika and runes and whatnot are impressing something onto people which wasn't there originally, and that might tie into the sword seals and the scar seals and whatnot, and or Grace in general. Or maybe she altered Grace in such a way that it isn't what it was supposed to have originally been, and that might tie into like the destined death type stuff. So, like I was saying a moment ago, there aren't any like definitive answers as far as that line of inquiry goes, as far as I know. So that's just kind of something that comes to mind. So I don't know how you guys feel about that either. But anyway, I did find this video enjoyable. Now let me hydrate real quick, and then we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so this next video is by none other than myself, and it's called Why the Frenzied Flame Ending is the Best Ending in Elden Ring. And I made this 2 years ago on April Fool's Day, and I figured it'd be a fun thing to look at it today and give my thoughts on it. So, alright. There seems to be a common misconception that the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending is Elden. I can definitely tell that I had my microphone positioned like kind of too close to the wall because of the extra echo in my voice, but oh well. There seems to be a common misconception that the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending is Elden Ring's worst ending, when the opposite is the case. Maybe some of you didn't play Dark Souls, but in Dark Souls 3 we learned that history keeps repeating itself, and artificially trying to prolong the status quo is ultimately bad for the world. Actually, I'll wait. Frenzied Flame ending is similar to letting the fire fade, in that both would restore equilibrium to the world by swallowing and erasing all that which divides and distinguishes. Alright, so from the outset, my goal in creating this video is to present everything as being relatively as factually true as possible from a certain point of view, and that view being an advocate for the Frenzied Flame here. So if you keep that in mind, you should really be asking about what I don't include in the video, or what might lie hidden between the lines there. Hey Mercy, how's it going? Things are getting meta, yeah? With disparity destroyed, all would become one, and suffering would come to an end. And of course, that one might be more of a lie, or at least more of a particular reading, because sure, in a way, suffering could come to an end if there's no one there to suffer things, but to say that things would go to equilibrium implies that equilibrium is a desirable thing, when in fact it may not be. So, it's natural to oppose such an ending, especially in the West, since ending suffering would mean an ending to life. But this is a concept that traces back thousands of years to the beginnings of Buddhism. Life is dukkha, or suffering. And then somebody absolutely slayed me in the comments with, life is dookie, or suffering. And then, yeah, that one's going to live in my head rent-free from now on. And then Global, nice to see you again, bro. That isn't to say that every waking moment is insufferable, but that the basic nature of what it means to live comes with certain conditions that can cause sadness, pain, and discomfort. Whether it be the realization that life is transient and we will all die one day, or that resources are finite, and in order to thrive, sometimes it's necessary to deprive others of what they need to survive, or even the more mundane everyday pains like hunger and the need for clothing and shelter. So all of this is true and in lines with Buddhism, with everything relating to suffering there. So I'm using this argument of truth from a point of convenience, and yeah. Schools of thought differ wildly on this point, but the way to free oneself from dukkha is to see life for what it truly is and let go of one's attachment to it. Attachment is what keeps people bound to the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. So letting go of one's attachment I should probably move this up. To life frees them from it, allowing their spirit to transcend the cycle in peace, free of earthly desires and the pain and suffering that comes along with it. Of course, to those of us who are attached to life, seeing someone who isn't can seem chaotic or insane. Thus, true enlightenment can border... Did you guys see it? The madman's wisdom? Someone who isn't can seem chaotic or insane. Thus, there we go. Gotcha. Enlightenment can border on madness to the uninitiated, which plays into why it's called the Frenzied Flame. But this is more of a meta-analysis. What does the game have to say about it? And then, of course, you gotta punctuate your own point with the music in the background, hence the bell chiming and whatnot. So, yeah. Although Frenzy Flame stones conferred madness onto those in its vicinity, it is worth noting that it has a healing effect on those who've pledged themselves to the flame, and may go on to show that what can appear chaotic or disordered at first can actually be soothing, calming, or even beneficial if you have the right perspective. And I think this is probably one of the more compelling arguments that I make in this video, because it is interesting that there is a component of healing within the Frenzied Flame itself, because when you drop the Frenzied Flame stones next to like its actual followers, they get that golden aura type effect and legitimately get healed by it, which is wild. It should also be telling, oh man, I could definitely tell when the audio is coming in and out, that of all the Tarnished who tried to ascend the throne of Elden Lord, that Vike, who is closest, decided to abandon everything and turn to the Frenzied Flame. The Golden Order and Elden Ring have a stranglehold on the universe. So this isn't entirely relevant, but since we do have some of the other content creators in chat, some of the tricks that I like to do to make more dynamic shots and turn to the Frenzied Flame. The Golden Order and Elden Ring have a stranglehold on the universe. Okay, yeah, it's over here. So for this shot, I have it slowed down to 0.25 times speed with the camera mod. And then... Tarnished who tried to ascend the throne of Elden Lord, that Vike, who is closest, decided to abandon... Right there is me manually increasing the footage speed to like 400% to make it go normal. So I kind of enjoy doing stuff like that. And then I've got some pretty cool stuff going with Hayata later that I'll point out too. Everything and turn to the Frenzied Flame. And then that argument about Vike abandoning the Frenzied Flame is another argument of convenience to highlight a point that works in my favor. But I think Vike's story is truly one told in tragedy, because he's presumably trying to become a Frenzied Flame to either spare his maiden, or he turns to it out of spite for what happens to his maiden. Or even if he did return to the Frenzied Flame first, he was unable to save his maiden, so we should also not implicitly trust what the followers of the Frenzied Flame have to say, I think. The Golden Order and Elden Ring have a stranglehold on the universe, and even ghosts suffer as a result of it.
Those who gave me grapes howled without words, saying they wished they were never born.
So this, before like the transition, this is just something from like basic film study where you could have a character off center from the camera, and that kind of shows a little bit of like an unevenness to their thoughts and whatnot. So that's kind of why I have Hayata close up and a lot of negative space here.
Become their lord. Take them.
And this I just was using to kind of visually break things up and keep people more engaged with the video.
Their torment.
And also it was cool as hell.
Despair, their affliction, every sin, every curse, and melt it all away. As the Lord of Chaos. No more fractures. No more birth.
So for this, I actually had to take a second shot of getting all over dialogue, so that way the UI element of the damn ellipsis was the proper size. So I had a close-up and then a medium shot, and then she's still off-center to represent that she's a little bit one-sided with her views here. Then fade to black. Forcefully melting away all pain and suffering may not fit the image of a stereotypically good ending, but it would free people from the false cycle of life, death, and rebirth imposed upon them by the Erdtree. And then I used Gwyn / Soul of Cinders theme here to try to prey on people's idea that Elden Ring probably has a cyclical nature just like Dark Souls, when that may or may not be the case. So this is kind of me trying to subliminally influence the audience here. Goldmask wants to automate and perpetuate such a system without intervention from others, essentially dispassionately prolonging suffering. And I think that's probably a fair take on things, depending on how you read Goldmask. So, yeah. And Fia would codify suffering in life even after death. And that's bad, okay? Dungeater, at least, wants to break the cycle of reliance on the Erdtree by embracing pain and suffering. But who really wants to live in a world of shit? And that's a bit of a non sequitur, but I do respect, like, the Dungeater ending for just embracing how crappy the world really is. So Platinum Chip, you're saying that the Frenzy ending could be easily argued as being just as bad as any other ending, similar to Mikla. You're still disregarding everyone else's free will and simply choosing death for them. Yes, I agree with that.
I am in a world of shit.
And then, of course, that's the Full Metal Jacket bathroom scene that I just imposed Dungeater's helm over Gomer Pyle, essentially. So, you know, just make a bit of a meme to make this video stand out a bit more. I had fun tracking Dungeater's head to that. Do you really think having the certainties of sight, emotion, faith, and touch all become impossibilities is meant to be the good ending? It's pretty clear Mia... And then, of course, that is me kind of making fun of the way that the localization has framed things, because that is a legitimate interpretation that somebody could walk away with, because I've definitely seen people infer that from the dialogue there. Miyazaki's trolling the player base by having the first canonical, arguably living waifu be a doll. Hey gamers, I heard you liked waifus, so I got you a doll to play with, but even she doesn't want you to touch her. And so this is supposed to be like the big brain Miyazaki head tilt, I guess. And just me saying that, hey gamers, even the doll doesn't want you to touch her is just true and real. So get wrecked, Ranny simps. It's just way too on the nose. And besides, Bloodborne already gave us a better doll waifu to clean the player's baby gamer diapers. And then that's just true. This makes the Frenzied Flame ending by far the best ending for the game, until we get DLC in 6 months, which totally ruins this video. And I was totally joking with this line, but I guess some people took it seriously, because I had people saying like, oh, this aged like milk like 6 months after this video came out. So I guess I got a little bit more free engagement from it. So anyway, happy April Fool's Day. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and retweet after becoming a channel member or patron for as little as $1 a month. And I think I'd already deleted my Twitter account by this point, so I was just adding more sarcasm to this story here. But on a more serious note, I'd like to thank Dan Creary for the thumbnail artwork. I think it looks really sick, and if you like it, you should check out his website at danielcrearyart.com. He's also currently open for commissions and was very easy to work with, so if you need some cool customized art in the near future, he's your guy. And yeah, Dan Curry is also the guy who made my Pepe Offnir down here at the bottom left of the screen. So if you guys do need some cool customized art, he's your guy. And remember, fear the April Fools. And of course, since I always have just like a blank black screen at the end of the video, I thought it'd be fun out of character to do like the cable end test screen, whatever you want to call it. What was my first Elden Ring vid? It was the one about the Erdtree and the Great Tree, and I think something else. Yeah, so I was a Great Tree denier from the very beginning. Which, who knows if that's true or not with the Skadu tree, you know? So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that little bit of an insight into why this is supposed to be an April Fool's video, despite it being played incredibly straight up until the very end. And I think like the top comments on this is like, oh no, maybe it's not the top comments anymore. Oh, imagine the runes you'd get from killing all of existence. Rad. That'd be a lot of them. Can't suffer if everyone's dead. somebody had said this is the longest that I ever believed in April Fool's joke, and I really liked that one. Yeah, the comments in this video are pretty great, to be honest. And then somebody like said something. It's like, man, I can't believe this is an April Fool's video. And then I was like, embrace true chaos and accept this is a true video, despite it being posted on April Fool's. You know, just playing into things there. Global, when you first watched this, you thought I was spitting, but then I said April Fools. Get wrecked. Yeah, so to me, there's always a lot more fun in the type of villain that speaks pretty much truth, because then you're like, wait a second, are they the bad guy? Are we the baddies? And of course, it's even better when there are lies by omission or just differences in perspective to shine different lights on things there. Hey, Robbie, nice to see you again. How you doing? So, okay, yeah. Next, we have Titanborn's Frenzied Flame and Midra, Elden Ring Shadow the Erdtree lore 4K. So, in keeping with the Frenzied Flame tradition with our April Fool's stuff, let's go ahead and check out Titanborn's vid. And he's in the chat right now if you guys want to say hello. Wait, what? Did I just delete it somehow? Oh, no, I just moved it.
I have touched.
This is your longest video. You put so much into it. I definitely know how that is. Like my gold and silver video, I don't remember if that's my longest. I'm pretty sure it is. That one took so long to produce. Between taking so long to write the scripts, I probably spent like 2 months on the script alone, and then like another month collecting footage and just straight editing. It was really rough. Robbie, you hope Silk Song's in the Nintendo Direct tomorrow? Everybody's faming for it. I will not believe Silk Song is coming out until after it is out and uploaded and downloaded by me and actively being played. But yeah, hey guys, in case you forgot, we have the new Nintendo Switch 2 Direct playing tomorrow at, what was it? Is it 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time? I think 6 Pacific Time, so yeah. You guys looking forward to it? I am. I'm probably going to try. I was thinking about holding off and trying to watch that for tomorrow, but I don't want to get like inadvertently leaked things throughout the day, so I'll probably try to peruse it on the sly. So, okay, here we go. Titan, Frenzied Flame, and Midra.
I have touched them.
And by the way, I also really like the framing of the shot already. Did you alter this in post? Because the contrast and field of view looks very interesting, like a little bit more saturated and darkened, perhaps. Maybe that's just the magic of 4K and me actually having a 4K monitor, even though I'm pretty sure this is only playing at like 720. I don't know.
The words of the three fingers. As your maiden, allow me to divine them. All that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures, and births, and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake.
So far, 30 seconds in, I will say that it's been edited very, very well here. I really like the transitions going in line with Hayata's dialogue there. I can tell that you have edited Hayata's dialogue to have a lot less gaps between her spoken words, because I know what that's like. And also just like the shot of the Midra, Frenzied Flame, and Renala was very good. Very cinematic so far, so just want to give you kudos there. Some in post, a lot in camera. Okay.
However ruined this world has become, however mired in torment and despair, life endures. Births continue. There is beauty in that. Is there not? If you would become Lord, do not deny this notion.
The Frenzied Flame represents a force of...
Oh no, man, that sucks. Okay, so your voice dialogue right here is a lot lower than Melena's and Hayata's from before, so I'll need to pump up the volume, I think, for everybody. Give me a second here.
Both in a literal and symbolic sense. Its influence seeks to overwhelm the mind, erase.
So a little bit of a tip for that is for my own dialogue, I try to have it on its own audio track in my video editing software. And so that way I can keep it relatively unmolested by other settings if I ever need to switch anything else. And then for like music, I keep on its own separate track. So that way I could keep everything at a pretty reasonable decibel volume. And then the other stuff, I typically just have in like a third track of its own.
Raising individuality and reason through sheer chaos. However, when examined through the game's thematic, textual, and symbolic elements, frenzy is not just an affliction, but a state of mind that stems from an inability to focus and control overwhelming emotions. Overcoming frenzy requires intense discipline, mental clarity, and a form of self-inflicted restriction, most notably represented through the metaphor of vision, blindness, and needles. Unendurable frenzy causes the yellow flame of frenzy to violently burst forth from the caster's eyes. It is the maddening pain and unstoppable tears of those afflicted with the flame of frenzy brought into being. The unstoppable tears come from more than just physical pain.
So this is me being a little bit pedantic, and this is probably more of a style thing than anything else. The brackets not having a space between the capital I of it is just a little bit odd to me. I think you can just type in an ellipsis, and if you have a space between the dots, you don't need to have the brackets because it'll be implied that you're not taking like a full quote and there's some extra context here. But that's not very relevant at all. It's just, you know, me trying to point some of this stuff out. Hey, Stella and Elda, how's it going, guys?
Unstoppable tears come from more than just physical pain. It is an emotional collapse, a descent into madness that cannot be contained. The lightning-like fire is a manifestation of agony, breaking free from within. However, the mind does not break all at once. There is resistance, a battle between reason and chaos.
I never noticed like the spirally type effect with that Midra attack right then.
There is resistance.
Like that? What? That's very interesting.
A battle between reason and chaos. In times past, every single person who attempted to control the flame of frenzy succumbed to madness after a desperate internal struggle. This incantation is a testament to a meager victory. A desperate internal struggle, the very nature of frenzy, is an assault on the mind. The phrasing implies that control is possible, but only temporarily. No one has or can master the frenzied flame, only delay the inevitable.
And in some ways, that kind of reminds me of how pyromancers were never able to fully control the flame in Dark Souls 1. Well, the Dark Souls trilogy, I should say.
Without discipline, without restriction, the mind is overwhelmed. This struggle is central to what it means to resist frenzy. The Lord of Frenzied Flame is described as taking upon themselves all the torment, despair, and afflictions, burning away every sin and every curse. To become the Lord is to embrace suffering and to allow oneself to be consumed by it entirely. This flame does not purify, it annihilates. The Lord of Frenzied Flame shall take their torment, despair, their affliction, every sin, every curse, all melted away.
So that line about doesn't purify, it annihilates is interesting and a little bit ironic to me because in many contexts, purification, or I should say in many cases, purification carries the context of, is that the right word? Context of annihilation. So anyway, like speaking of Mesmer and the Crusade, they were trying to quote unquote purify the lands from the Horn Scent, and they were essentially just doing a bit of a genocide. So That doesn't really go against anything you said there, but it just kind of tickled my brain there for a second.
This doesn't represent healing, but the erasure of suffering through the erasure of the self, of life. The individual.
And of course, since I just brought this up on my last video, I'd be curious about Titan's input on how those who are entrusted to the Frenzied Flame, for lack of a better term, can get healed by it.
Is lost, dissolved into madness, with nothing left but the chaos of the Frenzied Flame. To gaze into one another's eyes is truly the most intimate form of human contact. Frenzy spreads through the eyes, making vision the conduit of madness. This presents the idea that the mind's eye, the perception of reality itself, is warped by the frenzy.
And there's a lot of cool stuff that ties into this idea in Bloodborne. We have the so-called Brain of Mensis that can literally cause other things to become frenzied, with like blood spears shooting out of them just through coming into visual contact with it. And by visual contact, I don't mean you even have to look at the brain. As long as it sees you, it has the ability to influence you by becoming progressively more and more frenzied until you kind of go mad and your mind explodes in a little bit of a literal treat there.
Just as clarity of thought is needed to resist, exposure to the wrong visions leads to collapse. This is why those who embrace the Frenzied Flame do not only suffer from madness, they become madness, their very presence spreading it like an infection.
Kind of sucks that we never get a Frenzied Flame weapon incantation, you know? Even with the DLC.
Hayeta, a blind woman who fully embraces the Frenzied Flame, serves as a prime example of submission to madness. Despite her lack of physical sight, she sees through the mind's eye and willingly follows the Three Fingers, accepting their doctrine of total destruction. Her blindness does not protect her from the Frenzied Flame, rather it signifies her lack of resistance. Unlike others who fight against madness, Hayeta surrenders to it completely, demonstrating that frenzy does not require physical vision to take hold, it only needs a willing mind. And so, Hayeta serves as our maiden, guiding us to the Three Fingers. Just as the Erdtree's light calls a tarnish towards grace, Hayeta's guidance leads us to the depths where the Frenzied Flame awaits.
This isn't meant to contradict Titan, but one thing that kind of surprised me was that you technically don't even need Hayeta to become allied with the Frenzied Flame or possessed by it. Just as long as you go to the prescription by yourself and remove all of your equipment, you can come into contact with it, which is really wild. And part of the reason this sticks out to me so much is because when the game first released, I had screwed up Hayeta's quest because I'd killed all the mini bosses in Liurnia before moving on with the game, and I didn't meet Hayeta because I had already gone through Liurnia before going through Stormvale, or at least a lot of Liurnia before returning to Stormvale Castle. So after I beat Godric, I just kind of warped back to like the inner part of Liurnia, so I never saw Hayeta. Anyway, so I was telling somebody on Reddit that you couldn't do it because if you kill everybody, like, you can't talk to Hayeta and then you'll miss out on the quest. And then somebody's like, no, you actually don't need to talk to her. You can just go in front of the prescription and take off all of your clothing or equipment and whatnot, and then you could get Frenzied Flame. And I was like, what? So I tested it and I was like, oh, damn, bro, you're right. I'm sorry. Thanks for letting me know. So yeah. Burning Hayeta is just a bonus? Exactly.
The Erdtree's radiance, golden and warm, represents divine order, a path to structure and faith. Its light is a beacon, drawing the faithful toward unity. This illumination signifies guidance, a way forward for those who seek purpose and belonging within the Order. In stark contrast, the Frenzied Flame light is not warm, but searing, not gentle, but all-consuming. It does not guide, it overtakes. The Frenzied Flame does not illuminate the path, it blinds, engulfing the mind in uncontrollable madness. Where the Erdtree's light nurtures faith and obedience, the Frenzied Flame incites chaos and destruction. Following grace means accepting a place within the Order. Following Hyeta means relinquishing all order and embracing chaos.
Go to the door ahead. After divesting yourself of your possessions, it will surely open, and the three fingers will welcome you. May the flame of chaos find purchase within you.
That was a pretty smooth transition going over the shoulder of your Tarnished to focus on Hyeta there.
Welcome you. May the flame of chaos find purchase within you.
Hyeta's role as a guide thus mirrors the Erdtree's function, yet inverts its purpose. She is not a beacon leading to salvation, but a harbinger of ruin, leading the Tarnished toward a fate where individuality is lost in the inferno of frenzy. Her guidance does not offer hope or unity, only annihilation. In this way, she embodies the essence of the Frenzied Flame as its willing instrument, drawing others into the madness she has accepted as her truth. This connection between light, warmth, and guidance extends beyond Hyeta and the Erdtree. Light has always served as a symbol of direction and purpose, a force that leads the lost toward clarity. But sometimes it is ruin. Nanaya's torch. A torch made by attaching a dying flame of frenzy to a small spinal column. In a distant land, in an age-long past, was born a man who failed to become the Lord of Frenzied Flame. All that remains of him is cradled gently by Nanaya. The torch, a tool of illumination, embodies this principle. It dispels darkness, reveals the path ahead, and provides warmth against the cold unknown. In this way, Nanaya's role becomes clear. She was Midra's guiding light, both metaphorically and literally, mirroring Hyeta's role to the Tarnished. Nanaya serves as an outside influence, shepherding Midra toward destruction. We can see a similar dynamic play out between Marika and Mesmer.
I will not suffer. A lord devoid of light.
Enough. I have endured more than enough.
No, mother. Forgive me.
I ask you forgive me, dearest Nanaya.
Under the command of Marika, Mesmer is transformed into a symbol of fear and suffers greatly as a result. Then, on a fateful day, he is pushed to the brink and breaks free of her command. Just like Nanaya's words, so too were Marika's words, a curse. Mesmer's armor.
I should probably read that. Okay. As the golden barbs inflicted eternal agony upon him, Midra held fast to Nanaya's entreaty. Endure. The word was a curse.
Mesmer's armor. Black armor of Mesmer the Impaler. On his mother's wishes, Mesmer made himself a symbol of fear, undertaking the cleansing crusade she desired. Direct thy malediction, thine ire, and thy grief towards me alone. This dynamic, where guiding lights can lead toward chaos, self-destruction, abandonment, and pain, conveys a deeper message. By relying on light from external sources, one risks being misled, used, and ultimately abandoned, left to suffer in the darkness, unable to escape the cave. True liberation lies in turning inward, cultivating not only self-awareness, but also the pursuit of intellectual clarity. It's about questioning the narratives imposed on us, developing critical thought, and kindling the flames of reason and understanding, allowing one to rise above the darkness.
So I'm not too sure about that, but I'm just kind of still waiting to hear more to formally come up with some thoughts on that. Part 2, The Madness of Martyrs.
Frenzy stands as the antithesis to life and an end to suffering by ending life altogether. For in death there is only peace, for in death there can be no sensation. Midra understands this too well. He has endured more than enough.
Enough. I have endured more than enough.
It still makes me sad that Midra and Anaya have no relationship to America or the Empyreans or anything as far as we know. And they're just kind of like almost a throwaway in the lore. Or even level design, really.
And so, he too rejects the world as it is. But is it truly mercy to erase everything, or is it simply surrender? There are those who choose another path, a path not of escape, but of endurance, of struggle. To them, pain is not a mistake. It is the crucible of strength, the essence of life itself. Two extremes. One seeks to silence suffering, the other embraces it. But when does endurance become self-destruction? When does mercy become annihilation?
So hold on. I might have missed the connection where you brought the horn set into this.
Of escape, but of endurance.
Hold on.
Or is it simply surrender? There are those who choose another path, a path not of escape, but of endurance, of struggle. To them, pain is not a mistake. It is the crucible of strength, the essence of life itself. Two extremes. One seeks to silence suffering, the other embraces it.
So I'll need a little bit of support for this because nothing immediately comes to mind to like prop this up immediately.
But when does endurance become self-destruction? When does mercy become annihilation? To fully understand the relationship between Midra and the Inquisitors, or more broadly, the Hornsent culture, we must first examine the Hornsent religious practices.
Yeah, so like the only thing that I could think of right now is the Hornsent Bairn, whatever that one's called. But to me, that doesn't seem to embrace suffering. And the way that I look at the Crucible is kind of like Darwinism on steroids, where the might makes right and the survival of the fittest kind of dictates natural selection. And the Hornsent believe that they are the fittest because they got that fit, yo. All right, Elden enthusiast, you have a good night. Thanks for joining.
Hornsent's religious and philosophical beliefs revolve around pursuing purity through refinement, an unending crucible of becoming and evolution, where each encounter serves to hone the self. Whether through the divine warrior trials in combat or the Inquisitor's coercive questioning, every struggle is a means of transformation. This philosophy of refinement through hardship is reflected in every aspect of the Hornsent culture. Find Crucible Feather Talisman. Hornsent view the Crucible as sacred for the refinement wrought through its evolutionary gifts. most prominently their tangled horns. Their practices demand strict self-discipline, ascetics loincloth, attire of the tower's ascetics, embodying their commitment to an austere existence of strict self-control. Curse Blade Cirque, weapon of the masked curse blades. Circular backhand blade with wave-like cutting edges, sharpened into points that incite blood loss. Long ago, this was employed by the ascetics who strove to become tutelary deities, as a ritualistic object in their self-flagellating dances. For the Hornsent, suffering is not an affliction to be avoided, but a necessary crucible, one that tempers the body, mind, and spirit. Whether through physical trials, ascetic devotion, or the brutal inquisitions of truth, every hardship serves as a means of purification.
I do appreciate these observations. However, I also can't help but notice that despite everything, the Curseblade Hornsent seem to be failures to become tutelary deities, which may suggest that there's something more to the puzzle piece that they're missing, or to the puzzle that they're missing.
But the Hornsent didn't stop with the purification of themselves. They sought to use pain and suffering to purify the undesirables of their society. Tooth Whip.
Okay, so I think I could see where you're coming from with this. Not that I fully agree with it, because if you're thinking about like the self-lacerating practices of the curse blades, I could see how thinking of pain and suffering potentially leading to purification. Although to me, I would associate it more with like ritualistic bloodletting than pain and suffering. But of course, that's just kind of an inference, and you might not even really be implying that. They failed because they lost control. It's hardship. I don't think they lost control. I think they failed to give up control, which is a little bit different. Because I think they retain their ego, and the way to escape the cycle in the FromSoft games is to let go. It says that, does it? Let me look at the circ again. Hold on. Do you know which item description you're referring to? Because it's not the circ. Let me type in Curseblade then. These ascetics who failed to become tutelary deities were a scourge for those who attempted to... Nope, that's not it. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't find anything direct that I think ties into what you were saying. It's a combo of the blade and Curseblade Mira. See, I don't think it's hardship per se, but that just might be a difference in the way we're looking at things right here, which is fine.
Whip is strewn with rotten, misshapen teeth, filthy and seething with disease. The teeth are embedded in the whip and dose the victim with deadly poison upon each strike. As the wounds ripen, they grow inflamed and ooze pus. The flesh of shamans was said to melt harmoniously with others. This weapon was not a tool for battle, but a means of breaking and reshaping others through suffering. Its use was justified by their beliefs that through pain, one could be reborn into something greater. The Tooth Whip's skill reveals the true purpose of this weapon, not to kill, but to subdue, break, and control. A chastening whip strike, honed to maximize pain, temporarily reduces the rate at which stamina recovers. Thus, does the pain encourage obedience. This is not the strike of a warrior seeking victory, but of an oppressor seeking submission. The pain it inflicts is deliberate, designed to wear down the will rather than simply the body. By slowing stamina recovery, it weakens resistance over time, ensuring that the victim cannot fight back, cannot endure. It forces them into a state of exhaustion where compliance becomes inevitable. This reflects an aspect of the Hornsense ideology, that suffering is a path to purification, that pain is not just something to endure, but something to be inflicted, shaping the weak into something stronger through forced refinement. But this is a distortion of resilience. Pain for the sake of pain is not strength, it is control, it is suffering. This ideology reached its extreme in the treatment of the shamans. The Hornsense didn't merely conquer or subjugate them, they sought to forcibly remake them, integrating them into their own perceived path of refinement.
Oh, please, not the jar. Anything but that. I promise. I won't ever do it again. I swear. A living saint I'll be. Please, you must forgive me. Forgive me, please. They offer their prayers to the innards of great jars, such that they might be reborn one day into sainthood. This is the cycle of life, the cycle of death and rebirth taken into the hands of mortal men.
To the Hornsense,
if you like the voice acting, you should see pretty much any stream where I've had to do a JRPG. It gets pretty rough out here.
this was not cruelty, but salvation. By subjecting the shamans and criminals to forced metamorphosis, whether through physical suffering, assimilation, or being placed within the great jars, they believed they were offering them a path to purification.
And see, this is something that I would strongly disagree with based off of some differences between the English and Japanese text. My understanding would be that the shamans themselves are kind of already pure, and they need to be whipped by the whips to make their flesh malleable enough to be integrated with the horn-sent criminals. So the tooth whip, for example, says... harmoniously. Eventually the pussing and oozing Mikos would become malleable with other would become well malleable with other flesh. Sorry, that's a super literally not great translation there, but there's kind of a big difference. It says the flesh of shamans was said to meld harmoniously with others, which makes it sound as though it should be an innate property of the flesh of the shamans, whereas the Japanese has a little bit of a difference where it's not just flesh, it's flesh that's wounded and pussing and oozing that gets to meld with others, it said. And in addition to that, hold on, what were you just saying here?
Whether through physical suffering.
All right. So I don't think that the shamans themselves are being purified. I think they're trying to purify horn-sent criminals with the flesh of the shamans, which themselves should be purified by virtue of, or be pure by virtue of being Miko, like holy women, essentially.
Assimilation or being placed within the great jars, they believed they were offering them a path to purification.
And some of that, I think, also ties into how the Miko are referred to as saints or sainthood. So, the big difference between sainthood and the equivalent in Japanese, Yokihito, it's good person. So that way they could be reborn. And that's the cycle of Renee in man's hand, essentially. So how do I say that? Yeah, it's really just sainthood here, which might go a little bit far in terms of coloring people's perspectives of this.
It was a twisted interpretation of the cycle of death and rebirth taken into the hands of mortal men. One where suffering was not just a necessity, but a sacred obligation, where the shamans were forcibly broken and reshaped in the name of refinement. Alexander, the warrior jar, embraced struggle on his own terms. His journey was one of transformation, but unlike the shamans, he chose his path. He sought out battles, not as a means of destruction, but as a means of growth, pushing himself to his limits to become something greater. Alexander's jarring was not forced upon him, nor was it an instrument of suffering. It was a crucible of self-betterment. This stands in stark contrast to the shamans, who were thrown into jars against their will, their suffering dictated by others. The Haunted view pain as a path to refinement, but their methods twisted it into oppression. Alexander, by contrast, found strength through his own will, proving that refinement does not come from inflicted suffering, but from chosen endurance. In this way, Alexander represents the virtuous version of what happened to the shamans. Where they were shattered and reforged by others, he reforged himself. His journey was not one of subjugation, but of self-mastery, demonstrating that the path to strength lies not in being broken, but rising after every fall. Like a cracked pot that mends itself when shattered, Alexander endures and becomes stronger with every hardship. Cracked pot. This empty pot somehow mends itself when broken. Essential vessel for crafting cracked pot items. The shamans were thrown into jars as a punishment, their suffering dictated by others. But Alexander, a great jar, was not a vessel for torment. He was a vessel for strength.
So I think it's unfair to say that about the shaman. And if we go back to the whole, like, what life you were reported for this alone quote. Heh. Life were you accorded. Wait, accorded? Is this just a typo in my thing? No, maybe it is accorded. Anyway, so it says, for pity's sake, your place is in the jar. Nigh sainthood itself awaits you within. For shamans like you, this is your lot. Life were you accorded for this alone. The Japanese is kind of like, hey, get in the jar quietly, and then please be like a good person, like a saint, essentially. Be a good person, be a good girl. You lot are Mikos, shamans, and for that purpose, you were born because, essentially. So, the shamans are born to become good people, and they put criminals into the jars to make them good people. So do they just throw in a bunch of bad things to eventually get saints? I don't believe so. I think the necessary component for the criminals to kind of get reformed is the flesh of the shamans themselves, which to me implies that the sainthood property is intrinsic to the shaman folk and not the horn scent.
He was not shattered to be discarded, but to be reforged, proving that true resilience is not found in suffering alone, but in the ability to rebuild oneself again and again. The horn scent In their fervor to refine and uplift crossed a dangerous line. They no longer merely endured suffering, they inflicted it upon others, believing it was their right, even their duty, to force this path upon others they saw as impure. This is the philosophy that Midra rejected and why he and his followers were deemed heretics.
Part 3, Cycle of Vengeance. So before getting into this point, there are some things that I'm going to bring up in relation to suffering and whatnot. So we do have the Raven Mask talking about how pain reminds people that they're alive. And so if you want to equate that to suffering, or maybe that'll be going like a step too far to say like pain is implicitly suffering, but I mean, it kind of is. But anyway, I don't want to go too far down like that route. So pain at the very least seems to be a symbol of being alive, and like suffering relates to that. So I'm not so sure that it always like goes into pain equals refinement, unless you would want to make the argument that perhaps the reason that the Raven Mask hunters wear masks that dig into their face is that it will refine them from becoming deathbirds, I guess. I don't know. I just don't think that fully works within the context of other things in the game. But must I warn, as you venture in, heed the words of our great master Midra. Approach not the madness, lest ye succumb.
This was not a threat, but a warning. They did not seek to spread the frenzy.
I beg you, stop! Haven't I taken enough? Are we not brethren, common in our line? And yet, you offer only cruelty. I ask, what crime did great Midra commit?
The spirit isn't being coy. The Hornsent would have known that the frenzy was forbidden, so I asked what crime had Midra committed. Because there was none. His only heresy was his rejection of the suffering. He sought an end to the brutal trials of his kin, a way forward beyond torment. For that, the Inquisition was set upon him. Hunted, condemned, and offered only cruelty, Midra and his followers were driven to the very thing they had once feared. Neither he or his disciple had embraced the Frenzied Flame until they had no choice. Mad in hand, a glove stitched together from the flayed skin of the victims of a butcherous bloodbath, forged of an unyielding black impulse toward revenge fostered in those who were hunted down as heretics by their own brethren. These are the weapons of the utterly downtrodden. This is not simply a weapon, it is a testament to what happened to Midra's followers. The wording is clear. They were hunted down and butchered by their own kind. The Inquisition was not an act of simple questioning, it was a bloodbath. And in the wake of that slaughter, something else took root, an unyielding black impulse toward revenge. The massacre of his followers births the Madden Hands, which are not simply driven by ideology, but by an impulse for revenge, a raw emotional backlash against oppression. This reflects how trauma, when not processed or endured healthily, can turn into destructive cycles of retaliation.
Wait a second. This guy's a blood fiend. He's not a Frenzied Flame advocate at all. Hey everybody, he's a phony. He's a big fat phony.
This cycle of revenge mirrors Edgar's own pursuit of vengeance.
I'll find them. The foul wretches responsible for this. I'll hunt them down and exterminate every last one of them. Rest assured, Arena, it will be done.
Ah, the poor fellow, gone perfectly mad. Love, revenge, the frenzied flame melts it all away.
While Edgar himself is an oppressor, the misbegotten rise against him in retaliation, only for Edgar to seek retribution in turn. An endless chain of suffering, driven by the same forces that shape the Madden Hands. Grafted Blade Greatsword. The storied sword of Castle Morn, a revenger's weapon. It is burdened by oceans of anger and regret. A lone surviving champion from a country now vanished was so determined to continue fighting that he claimed the sword of an entire clan of warriors. This is the grim fate that befalls those trapped in cycles of suffering and retribution. Midra's defiance of his people's cruel traditions was met with merciless persecution, and in turn, his followers, consumed by their anguish, gave birth to the Madden Hands, a manifestation of vengeance so absolute they turned it into a weapon. The tragedy of Midra's followers is not just in their pain, but in what their pain became. This story serves as a warning. When oppression is met with unchecked retaliation, suffering does not end. It is reborn, transformed, and passed down. Edgar's own descent into revenge mirrors this truth, proving that without breaking the wheel, there can be no peace, only the endless forging of new weapons burdened with anger and regret.
Part 3.5, Exegesis versus Dogma. Am I saying that right? I feel like I'm not. Anyway, Chungus Toad, welcome on in.
To purify Midra's followers, to force them back into their way of life through suffering. Instead, they created something far worse. What was once a rejection of suffering became an uncontrollable, frenzied rage. The philosophy of the Haunted dictated that hardship refine the soul. But what happens when hardship is unbearable? When suffering is pushed beyond endurance? The answer is frenzy. Midra and his followers only sought to put an end to the pain-focused practices of their culture. But the dogmatic teachings of the Haunted had him branded as a heretic. If part of the sacred crucible is pain, how dare he question it? Just as Goldmask lamented, it is easy for learning and learnedness to be reduced to the ravings of fanatics. At its core, this conflict is more than just religious persecution. It is the culmination of a fundamental philosophical disagreement. Midra, who was hunted by the Inquisitors, bears a name that strikingly parallels the Jewish word midrash, meaning textual interpretation, study, or exegesis. In the Talmudic tradition, midrash is not just an act of reading, but of questioning, reinterpreting, and challenging established meanings. This connection is significant. The Inquisitors represent rigid dogma.
Is that different from hermeneutics? Hermeneutics is the study of how to... Wait, this is AI over you. Damn it, I freaking hate that crap, bro. Oh my god. The branch of knowledge that deals with interpretation, especially of the Bible or literary text. Textual interpretation, study, or exegesis. Hermeneutics versus exegesis. So hermeneutics is specifically for the Bible, it looks like? Wait, what? Exegesis and eisegesis are two conflicting ways to study and interpret specific passages in the Bible. Hermeneutics deals with the approach to biblical interpretation. Exegesis means to lead out of. The reader starts with the text and draws conclusions about the meaning based on historical, cultural, grammatical analysis. Okay. I know this isn't relevant to the video exactly. This is just me being curious about etymology and context. No, not context. Connotation. That was the word I couldn't think of earlier. And connotations. Exegesis is more about getting at the original meaning of the text, perhaps? Oh, that's a Reddit thing. The difference is theory versus practice, perhaps. Salamanki, welcome on in. Weddy255, welcome in. Midrashim is like where we got lore on Lilith and stuff, not explicitly in the Talmud. Okay. It's part of philosophy, Husserl. Okay. Makes sense. Yeah, I know hermeneutics extends beyond the Bible. It just kind of sucks when you're trying to get answers on the internet and the Google tries to give you some AI garbage answer that doesn't actually answer what you're looking for. So thank you, iMan. Appreciate that. I'm going to back it up a little bit so that way we're a little bit more on track.
Midrash is not just
let back up.
Midrash, meaning bears a name that strikingly. It is the culmination of a fundamental philosophical disagreement. Midra, who was hunted by the Inquisitors, bears a name that strikingly parallels the Jewish word midrash, meaning textual interpretation, study, or exegesis. In the Talmudic tradition, midrash is not just an act of reading, but of questioning, reinterpreting, and challenging established meanings. This connection is significant. The Inquisitors represent rigid dogma, the belief that suffering is sacred and unquestionable. But Midra, in his very essence, represents exegesis, the act of interpreting, reevaluating, and challenging what is deemed sacred. His existence is a threat not because he wields power, but because he dares to ask, must suffering be a path to purity? To fully grasp the weight of this philosophical divide, it helps to understand the nature of exegesis itself. What is an exegesis example? The process of exegesis can be applied to any form of written text, including fiction and non-fiction. A theoretical example of exegesis would be to examine an ancient Greek play and use the process of exegesis to uncover its true meaning. This may involve looking at the author's context and the various literary elements used in the play. It could also include exploring the play's connection to other works of literature from the same period. Exegesis is a means of uncovering deeper truths by reinterpreting foundational texts, while aporia, a related concept in philosophy, deals with uncertainty and doubt. Aporia challenges assumed knowledge, exposing contradictions and forcing reevaluation.
So Mothcrab, welcome back in. Salamonkey asks, forgive my ignorance, but isn't Lilith just the boogeyman? So if Corn or somebody else more knowledgeable about like ancient biblical study could chime in, that'd be welcome. But from my understanding, the Talmud and stuff may or may not entirely be like a Jewish, I can't think of the word, not anachronism. That other word when something gets disincluded from texts. Apocryphal text of the Old Testament in which it chronicled Adam and his life, and Lilith was allegedly his first wife, and they got into an argument over who should have the dominant sexual position, and Lilith wanted to be on top, and therefore that would imply that like women are supposed to be dominant over the men. Adam disagreed and kind of divorced her, and then he got Lilith or Eve later on as a second wife who was more subservient to him. So I don't know how. I mean, obviously it fell out of canon for a reason. I don't know if it was ever actually truly canon. There are arguments to be made either way, I'm pretty sure, but in a sense, one could make the argument that she went on to become a kind of boogeyman. She's often depicted as like the first succubus, like the first like humanoid demon, but of course that's an apocryphal text. Yeah, apocryphal. Thank you. You just thought it was old wives' tales? No, I mean, it was definitely a thing, but I mean, I don't know how widespread it was. And from what I understand of early Judaism and Christianity, a lot of traditions weren't like universal because it was such a regionalized practice of beliefs that kind of became more formalized as time went on.
Interestingly, exegesis is often used as a method to explore aporia, meaning the two are intertwined. This is precisely what Midra represents, an aporia within the Haunt's faith. He embodies the moment of doubt, the contradiction that cannot be ignored, and the Inquisitors, acting as enforcers of dogma, seek to erase that doubt before it spreads. Thus, the conflict between Midra and the Haunted is not just about religious doctrine. It is a war between rigid belief and interpretative thought, between unquestioned adherence and the pursuit of deeper understanding.
Sorry about that. Moth Crab says time feels like a suggestion in the Old Testament lore. Like one line, someone will be married, and the next line, they'll be dead, and then it turns out they had tons of children, etc. So from what I understand, maybe this isn't so much true of the Old Testament. I'm a little bit more familiar with like the scholarship surrounding the New Testament, which is to say not very familiar at all, but just a little bit more. And that there have been different authors over time, and because of that, certain storytelling points might have some similarities or differences which are more particular to variances in authorship. Part 4, Overcoming Frenzy.
Frenzy is not mere madness. It's the culmination of pain left to fester, a fire that consumes reason and selfhood alike. Those afflicted by frenzy are not simply insane, but are caught in an emotional abyss. Their will hijacked by anguish that offers no path forward, fated to destruction. Overcoming frenzy is not about mere resistance, but about understanding, tempering, and ultimately transcending the forces that drive one toward ruin. Miquella's Needle. One of the unalloyed gold needles that Miquella crafted to ward away the meddling of outer gods, capable of subduing the flame of frenzy if inherited, allowing one to cheat fate and avoid becoming Lord of the Frenzied Flame. However, the needle is yet unfinished and can only be used in the heart of the storm beyond time, said to be found in Far Missoula. The phrase, the eye of the needle, is a well-known metaphor for precision, transformation, and discipline. To pass through the metaphorical needle's eye, one must strip away excess distractions and emotional disturbances.
Yeah, I must have made a joke about that in Needless Singer's video, but I didn't want to be mean, so I didn't.
Reinforcing the need for clarity and purification. This directly opposes the nature of frenzy. In this context, piercing the eye with Miquella's Needle represents threading the needle of control, narrowing one's perception to a singular point of focus in order to resist the madness. The description of Miquella's Needle states, it allows one to cheat fate and avoid becoming the Lord of Frenzied Flame, and that it can only be used in the heart of the storm beyond time in Far Missoula. This suggests that fate in this case is not an external cosmic decree, but an inevitability caused by losing oneself to overwhelming emotions. The Lord of Frenzied Flame is not chosen rationally. Rather, those who inherit the flame do so because they are consumed by their suffering.
But I want to back that up because I was comparing the Japanese for cheat fate, kaihi, which means like evade. So I wasn't paying as close attention to Titan's words here, since it seemed like he was getting he was focusing heavily on cheats. It just kind of drew my attention to that a little bit too strongly, perhaps.
Inevitability's case is not an external cosmic decree, but an inevitability caused by losing oneself to overwhelming emotions. The Lord of Frenzied Flame is not chosen rationally. Rather, those who inherit the flame do so because they are consumed by their suffering, unable to control or redirect their despair. To cheat fate is to resist the emotional forces that would otherwise lead one down that path. This aligns with how the game presents frenzy as the ultimate loss of control, a surrender to madness that strips away individuality.
Oh my.
I don't know if I agree with that framing. I kind of want to listen to it again, to be honest.
The game presents otherwise lead one down that. To cheat fate is to resist the emotional forces that would otherwise lead one down that path.
To resist the emotional forces that would lead you down that path. Maybe.
This aligns with how the game presents frenzy as the ultimate loss of control, a surrender to madness that strips away individuality.
Oh my. Why the long face? I fear that you were previously acquainted with this vessel. Well, that is most unfortunate. For he is dead. As for his flesh, he gave it to me. Shabriri.
The heart of a storm beyond time, then, represents a place of stillness amid chaos. A point where one can momentarily step outside the relentless pull of fate and choose a different path. This idea is reinforced by Pharaoh Missoula itself being described as beyond time and tied to the ancient dragon lord Placidusax. The ancient dragons wield storms, which symbolize raw emotions, wild, untamed, and destructive when left uncontrolled. However, despite dwelling in the heart of the storm, Placidusax remains still, his very name meaning calm boulderstone, an unshakable presence amidst the chaos. His seat, said to exist beyond time, aligns with the idea that to master one's emotions, one must exist in the present, neither dwelling on the past or anxiously anticipating the future.
That's probably a fair way to think about meditation and the way of the path of the dragon in the Dark Souls franchise, to be honest.
The storm is...
Salamanca, you only watched me? Well, now you get to watch me watch somebody else. So we all get to broaden our horizons together. What he says, isn't the ancient dragon's whole thing their lack of emotions? Like they have to gain feeling? In Dark Souls 1, you mean? So we do have them kind of quote-unquote being corrupted by emotions. So like the gaping dragon was corrupted by hunger, but kind of like the path of the dragon is one of asceticism, because you kind of see the dragon folk being like gaunt and turning more dragon-esque. The dragon folk being like former humans and whatnot. But if you're talking about an Elden Ring, let me think about that. It's the dragons in Elden Ring do seem a little bit different from what we get in Dark Souls. So I was thinking about making a video about the rock art a while back. I might still do it, but I don't know. It just takes a little bit of a, motivation to gather my thoughts and write them in such a way that they're easily digestible to others who might not be on the same wavelength initially. So there's something very strange and interesting about the rock arts, because I'm trying to remember which one is which. I almost typed in like Rick Roll. Oh, maybe it's Florisax's dialogue. Let me try to find it. Wait, did she not introduce her own name? Bro, what is something Florisac says? Dragon Communion. Or she definitely talks about Bale. Found Egon. Okay, so she talks about Bale. I remember that name well, the Broken Drake Warrior, driven by bottomless hunger and fiery ambition, precisely what the Dragon Lord envisaged for men who partake in Dragon Communion. The mad hunger and fierceness of spirit that only flows from those young and short of sight. He rather reminds me of Bale, in fact. So, sorry, she wasn't talking about Bale. She was talking about Egon initially. Such thoughts are unfathomable to ones as old as we. So this kind of dialogue in conjunction with the Rockheart, which says, the last thing the partaker saw with human eyes is a sunset, its colors faded and tarnished, a remote thing from eternity, implies to me that the ancient dragons might have consumed so much desire that they're no longer capable of truly feeling desire. Trying to think of a good counterexample for something like that. Let me look at chat, see what you guys are saying. You only learn her name with a spirit ash, rip. She sees Egon like he's as bad as Bale. Not necessarily as bad, but they both have the same kind of hunger and yearning, which the ancient dragons seem to lack. Or they might not even lack yearning. They might just have so much yearning that there's like literally nothing else for them to experience to the point they become numb to it, if that makes sense. Yeah, they're basically over it. So, damn it, the Godfrey thing is a good example, but also a bad example. So one thing which stands out to me right now would be the way that once Godfrey slew his last mighty foe, the light in his eyes faded because he'd essentially reached the peak. And then once you go beyond the peak, where else do you have to go but down, essentially? So the Placidus Axe thing might be a different situation here. Like, he might have been challenged by Bale, but he might not even really care other than just, like, continuing to want to exist in the present in the storm beyond time, for all we know. And, of course, that's a little bit of a personification on our part of what may or may not be related to Placidus Axe's mental state, if it even has one. But presumably it does, based off of what Florisax says. Anyway, part of the reason why I think Florisax needs to offer her sleep to Placidus Axe is because he has such a great degree of will, he literally cannot go to sleep, because will is what wakens somebody from sleep. I think it's will to awaken. Yeah. In the midst of drowsiness, there is the will to awaken, feelings that arise from the depths of one's heart. So that's a little bit of a liberal localization there, but I don't really think that's an issue at all. So the will is what makes the consciousness able to be, essentially. Wait, consciousness? Jikaku? Awaken. Anyway. His will is so greater even. Thanks. Mao, you think the dragons are so old they have emotional atrophy? That's potentially it as well. Global, your favorite theory is that the big dead dragon is Bale, and the one that we fight is Dragonkin Bale, and the one that contradicts this theory is that Wait, the Plasty heads and Bale's back? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Hey, Hulko, nice to see you again. It's been a minute.
Not the enemy. To be caught in it is to be consumed, but to command it is to master oneself. This is the lesson of the ancient dragons. They do not suppress the storm, nor do they surrender to it. They wield it. True resilience is not...
That's right, guys. They are Iroh teaching Zuko how to lightning bend.
...found in denying emotions, but in understanding them, its power, and directing them without being ruled by them.
Actually, it's not lightning bend. It's lightning redirect. You got me. You have to admit just how badass the nuke attacks that Placidus Sax has, with the way that it also wipes out the music. I really love attention to details like that.
This connection is further emphasized by the description of the ancient dragon smithing stone, which states, "The ancient dragon lord's seat is said to lie beyond time. This stone lightly twists time." The twist in time of Far Missoula is not just a literal distortion, but a metaphor for stillness, the ability to step outside the rush of events and remain fully present. In contrast, frenzy represents the complete loss of control, a state where one is ruled by overwhelming emotions rather than mastering them. Just as the storm rages around Placidus Sax while he remains calm, resisting frenzy requires inner stillness amid the chaos. Thus, the ancient dragons embody a stoic ideal, not rejecting emotion, but controlling its power rather than being consumed by it. By achieving this balance, one can resist the pull of frenzy, cheating fate. By not being ruled by the strong emotions brought on by suffering and hardship. The answer to frenzy is not to fight the storm head on, but to become like Placidus Sax, centered, present, and unshaken.
This isn't entirely relevant, but like what would... Or this isn't even really realistic, but anyway, follow along here for a moment, if you will. Like, what would happen if you could imbue emotions into rock? Or maybe not imbue emotions, if you could imbue will into a rock. Would it really begin to have emotions? Could it even conceptualize what an emotion was if you somehow made a rock into like an animate creature? Or would it just kind of exist? And with that kind of setup in mind, is that essentially what the dragons themselves are, like walls of living rock? The reason why they don't have emotions because they cannot have emotions? Obviously, that doesn't entirely work with Bale, but the drakes aren't exactly the stone ancient dragons either, so maybe there isn't any problem with that.
Frenzy does not take hold immediately. It spreads when defenses, both physical and mental, are broken. Just as armor shields a body and stone scales shield the dragons, these minds must be shielded against despair and unrestrained emotion. Those who fail to maintain these defenses are consumed, whether by madness, vengeance, or death. The ancient dragons understood this well. Their stone scales acted as both a physical and symbolic barrier, protecting them from corruption. These scales were not just armor, but a reflection of their endurance, their resistance against outside forces.
Well, he brings up a good point that they should have emotions because Florisax learns to love, and you're pretty sure Fortisax did as well. The one most beloved. Does that mean an active form of love? Let me think about that. Most beloved. Well, either way, I mean, Fortisax's actions don't necessarily seem the most rational, perhaps. I should probably look up Vike. That'll be faster. Like the Dragon Spear is the one that Lansax loved the most. Yeah, Motomo Aishita. Okay. And then what else were we talking about? Let me look back at that. Florisax. I don't remember Florisax with love, but that's fine. Titanborn sees the ancient dragons as stoics. They're old and have the wisdom to control their emotions. They're gold first and stone second. That's why they're the gold scales beneath the stone. That's fair.
Dragon Crest's Great Shield Talisman. The ancient dragons, who ruled in the prehistoric era before the Erdtree, would protect their lord as a wall of living rock. And so it is that the shape of the dragon has become symbolic of all manner of protections. But 40 Sacks lacked or lost these scales, leaving them vulnerable to Deathblight. After Godwyn the Golden became the Prince of Death, the ancient dragon fought long and hard against the death within its companion. Alas, victory was never achieved, and its only reward was corruption. The loss of their barrier led to their downfall. They fought against death, but without protection, they too were consumed by it. A similar struggle is seen in Vike, the Tarnished, who came closest to becoming Elden Lord before succumbing to the Frenzied Flame. His armor, though scorched, acted as a shield, a last defense against madness. Iron armor singed and blistered by fingers. No other Tarnished was closer to the throne of Elden Lord than Vike. But without announcement, Vike traveled far below the capital and was scorched by the flame of frenzy. His armor resisted, but it was not enough. And when the player seeks the three fingers, they must remove their armor to fully embrace the frenzy.
Go to the door ahead. After divesting yourself of your possessions, it will surely open, and the three fingers will welcome you.
The implication is clear. Frenzy requires complete surrender, an abandonment of all defenses, all restraints. But where frenzy spreads through surrender, its cure lies in resilience.
So I definitely agree with the point that the reason why Vike may have symbolically failed is because he wore his armor when he was embraced by the fingers. And we do have some kind of corroborating evidence for that kind of chain of thoughts from the Miyazaki dev interviews about Dark Souls 1. Because in Dark Souls 1, there's a character named Big Hat Logan who, believe it or not, wears a big hat. And the reason why he wears a big hat is because he needs a lot of extra shade for how big and overheated his brain gets. Not really, I'm kind of joking there. Anyway, I almost called him Seath. Logan wants to study crystal magic, which relates to the essence of the soul and whatnot. And he learns a lot of his crystal magic from a crystalline type of fake ancient dragon called Seath the Scaleless. Now, coming into contact with the essence of the soul can drive one mad, and Logan was trying to figure out how to become like a dragon. I guess we don't really get the full details there because, you know, it's from soft storytelling. But anyway, in an interview with Miyazaki, the dude's like, hey, why does Logan get naked before he fights you? And then Miyazaki's like, oh, I wanted to show that he's kind of abandoning his humanity to become a dragon, but he didn't entirely do that because he kept his hat on. and everyone's like, how the hell are we supposed to get that? So anyway, based off of what we've now retroactively learned about Dark Souls lore, I think you could apply that principle to Elden Ring to kind of support Titan's argument here that Vike probably failed because he didn't go all the way. What a little pansy.
Just as the Tarnished must journey to Farum Azula, the domain of the ancient dragons, to rid themselves of the Frenzied Flame, Vike was once loved by an ancient dragon. This suggests that the dragon's stoicism, their ability to endure without succumbing, is the true answer to frenzy. Midra's giant needle, the sword of damnation, is not unlike Miquella's needle. Both act as restraints, halting the spread of frenzy, yet neither offers true freedom.
Alright, I'm going to be a little bit of a poop head and say that this isn't a needle. And if it is, man, I really feel bad for Titan whenever he has to go to a doctor's visit.
Just as Miquella's needle suppresses frenzy without removing its presence, the sword of damnation is a symbol of suppression, not mastery. It is a barrier, but barriers alone do not lead to control. They only delay the inevitable. Had Midra's followers endured without losing themselves to vengeance, their fate may have been different. Instead, they were caught in the same cycle as Edgar, who sought revenge for his daughter's murder, just as the misbegotten sought revenge against him. This endless chain of suffering mirrors how frenzy spreads through despair, retaliation, and the loss of all restraint. Both frenzy and vengeance thrive where suffering is unchecked and defenses are broken. Those who have lost everything, who have no barriers left, become susceptible to forces beyond their control, whether it be death, madness, or the cycle of revenge. The lesson is clear. To overcome frenzy, one must endure without surrendering to it. To lose oneself in vengeance or despair is to become a part of the cycle, to be consumed by it. Whether it's Midra's followers, the nomadic merchants, or 40 sacks, the pattern remains the same. Without protection, without resilience, corruption will take root. If surrendering to madness, vengeance, or despair leads to destruction, then the answer must lie in resilience, in standing firm against the ocean of suffering without letting it define or consume you. True strength is not found in retaliation, nor in blind suppression of emotions, but in learning to endure without losing oneself. The ancient dragons, despite their flaws, teach of
I'm going to back that up right there. So yeah, I think a lot of Titan's points could also be strengthened by comparing the situation with despair and the Frenzied Flame, with the kind of despair that Millicent feels if you choose to betray her at the end of her quest line, because the despair from your betrayal is what causes her to bud and bloom, according to, I think, the Valkyrie prosthesis. Wait, no. Millicent's prosthesis. And, yeah, that could just help strengthen the argument here. Then, Demanier, welcome back into the stream. And Doomfist himself, welcome on in. So, there's something else I wanted to bring up. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'll wait.
The ancient dragons, despite their flaws, teach a vital lesson. Protection is not just about armor, but about resilience. 40 sacks fell because they lacked stone scales. But those who keep their defenses, who do not
40 sacks. Got him.
Because they lacked stone scales. But those who keep their defenses, who do not allow them to be broken down by suffering, can stand firm.
So, I mean, Fortisax has scales.
They lacked stone scales.
They're just kind of corrupted by the death blight and stuff. Like, there's still the gold under there as well. So I don't think that's fair. I think that just shows the futility of trying to conquer something that's, like, extra dead in a way.
But those who keep their defenses, who do not allow them to be broken down by suffering, can stand firm. In the same way, those who resist frenzy, who refuse to be consumed by vengeance, can find another path. Not one of suppression, but of mastery over emotion, of enduring suffering and hardship without becoming it. This is the way forward, not to be ruled by pain, but to rise above it.
Subscribe, like, comment, share.
Thank you for watching the video. Like, comment, and subscribe.
No. All right, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and share this with you guys in the chat. If you want to give Titan some support, he's in the chat as well. He's been a good trooper. He requested that we, tear his video apart. Not really. But anyway, I did enjoy the video. There's another component to Frenzied Flame type stuff, which has fascinated me for a while, that I think might have a stronger tie-in to Edgar. Because when you go into the Revenger's Shack in Liurnia, before interacting with Irina or Hayata, it will be empty. However, after you begin Irina/Hayata's questline and get Edgar to leave the Weeping Peninsula and inhabit, or at least invade the Revenger's Shack, it will be inundated with a bunch of raw meat dumplings, after he said he'll get revenge on all the misbegotten and whatnot, which is fine. So I think the implication of that is that Edgar himself is eating the raw meat dumplings. Now, I realize that is a little bit of a jump, but part of the reason I came to that thought is because when you go to Mount Gelmir and look at the people on the mountain, like the Lanedell soldiers, let me try to find it. You have a bunch of, you have a bunch of soldiers eating their brethren. And that made me wonder if cannibalism has any ties to becoming inundated with frenzy. And that can be expanded upon if you include the way that Irina/Hayata is force-fed human eyes as grapes, and she slowly becomes more maddened. She gets that kind of light that she begins to see. So I wonder if consumption of flesh, which is similar to yourself, kind of like breaks down your individual barriers, which causes you to become more susceptible to outer influence, perhaps. But again, that is just more a headcanon, tinfoil thoughts as well. So Titan, you noticed that as well. So yeah, I would have been interested to see any connections that you would give to like cannibalism in that. And one of the thoughts that I also had about the nomadic merchants, and this doesn't work so well for the ones above ground at the very least, would be that, hey, if they're all locked underground, what the hell do they have to eat for the rest of eternity? Soylent Green, that's right, each other. Platinum, you thought the dumplings were on some noble corpses in the shack? You may be wrong. Right, well, he said he'll get revenge on everybody. And we see like Irina killed by a misbegotten cleaver. So the fact that the misbegotten were rebelling in the Weeping Peninsula could be one way to read that. And then perhaps Edgar's revenge extended further. Maybe he already went mad. Maybe he was killing nobles. Maybe, just maybe, FromSoft doesn't really have misbegotten corpses from which you can loot things. Believe it or not. So nonetheless, I think the raw meat dumplings themselves are implied to be like human meat. The Soylent Green itself. Let me see. Okay, it's not explicit. A pungent raw meatball made succulent by virtue of being on the verge of turning. Restores HP but also poisons the user. Not recommended for those who prefer to know the origins of their meats. Huh. That's like, nobody knows what the hell kind of meat it is, but if you want to be put at ease, don't put this in your mouth. So I kind of like the localization for that one, to be honest. There's a disease that only comes from cannibalism. Yeah, so like the prions, I always forget how it's pronounced. Like mad cow disease. Yeah, it's pretty bad. We force-fed Hayata? Well, we don't know when she first ate the eyeballs. Like, maybe a ghost gave it to her. She's blind. So at the very least, she was unaware of what they were, and she had a violent reaction to learning that they're human eyes. So she was certainly taken advantage of in some way. Don't we loot meat from all kinds of living humanoids, though? Like white meat? Yeah, but those ones are explicitly said to come from, like, animals and stuff. But raw meat dumpling, the implication, I believe, is that it's supposed to be human flesh. Or at the very least, raccoon meat laden with worms. Hey, Vorb, nice to see you again. Boggart's going through the motions by cooking his prawns. Eating Jura matter is dangerous, don't eat brains. Well, now that you tell me that, I'm not going to do it. So, yeah, Titan, I did enjoy the video. Very impressive cinematography work here. So I appreciated that as well. So, yeah, okay. I don't actually have another video queued for tonight. I'd like to get a bit of an earlier end for tonight because I was unable to finish editing a video. It's not anything lore related. I was trying to have it done on April 1st because it's a less serious video, especially for my channel. So I'll kind of like leave things under wraps and, you know, just stoke the Frenzied Flames for the release of that. Hopefully tomorrow, but we'll have to see. I'm mostly I'm like 95% there, but just trying to get that like last 5% is a little bit time consuming. So maybe saying 95% done isn't entirely fair. So since I didn't hit my deadline today, I might go back and up the quality where I can. So anyway, I think I'm going to end things here early for tonight, and we will continue again at the same time of 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And for those who want to tune into the Nintendo Direct, reminder that one begins at 6 a.m. in the morning, at least for you Californian folks on the West Coast, Pacific Standard Time on the 2nd, depending on your time zone. So anyway, thank you all for joining. Hopefully I'll catch you on the next one. So until then, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.